boss that's special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level gaming. Second level.
A while back on Reddit, a user by the name of Voyager made a fantastic catalog of all the general unofficial rules that govern Overwatch ranked gameplay. The guide was a masterful compilation of the fundamentals that should govern your thought process when playing a ranked Overwatch match. Information was gathered from his own observations in the lower ranks, popular high rank streams, educational Overwatch YouTube videos, and other Reddit guides. After reading the guide, I couldn't help but be blown away by the power of the simple yet effective information within. It really was one of the best guides I had ever read for improving play. Whilst the guide is absolutely influenced by pro play, it can be deemed as a step-by-step guide to climbing from the lower ranks up, or as a self-reflection guide for high-ranked players to remind them of the fundamentals when they aren't making those big flashy plays. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, and whilst Voyager has tried to account for as much as possible, in a game like Overwatch, there will always be situations that vary from the norm. So overall, it would be better to not consider these rules at all, and more just guidelines to successful techniques during play. Overwatch is a hugely complex game, and making judgment calls in a split second doesn't always lend itself to hard and fast rules. Treat this more as a best case scenario guideline list, and you'll probably fare better for it. With Voyager's express permission, we have taken it upon ourselves to create a video detailing those points for prosperity and ease of use. It's worth pointing out, however, that 100% of this information was originally compiled by Voyager, while some embellishment, editing, voiceover, and gameplay clips have been handled by Level 2 and our regular Overwatch contributor TigratoPower. The guide will be broken into two major sections: gameplay and mentality, both of which are equally as important to succeeding in the world of Overwatch Ranked. Within, you will find information that will absolutely lead to better habits, and hopefully the ability to climb. Of course, you'll need a few of your teammates to develop the same habits too. Take a deeper look at the mentality section to see how positive reinforcement can help develop good habits in those around you while you play. We'd love to hear if this guide helped your personal play, so feel free to leave comments detailing your experiences putting it into practice, and perhaps leaving any additional tips you may have learned on your way to the top. So, without further ado, we present Voyager's Guide to the Fundamentals of Overwatch Ranked, presented by Level 2 Gamers and TigratoPower. Let's kick things off with gameplay. If you were to distill gameplay down to its core, you really have one basic objective in any teamfight: stay alive and get kills. This may seem like we're oversimplifying it, and to an extent, you'd be right. However, if you think about how many times you die during a match, or do your own self-VOD analysis, it's fair to say that usually the biggest moments to stop and take stock are when you kick the bucket. The immediate consideration is, what did I do wrong here to earn myself a trip back to spawn? Any coach will tell you that these are the most telling moments about your flaws. It points out bad positioning, overextension, and poor awareness. Hindsight is 20/20, and observing yourself making these mistakes is the easiest way to rectify them. Now, let's say you are a master at staying alive, but you're not contributing much to the kill feed. Then depending on your role, you are almost equally at fault. Teamfights don't end until one team gets the advantage over the other. Obviously, there are environmental advantages such as spawn proximity advantage, but essentially, the team that frags out the most will win the fight. Barring ultimates, of course, which are in a category all of their own. So yeah, the most fundamental contribution you can give to yourself and your team is to simply stay alive and get kills. Now let's take a deeper look at exactly how to do that. Constantly watch the kill feed. As soon as you notice you have one less player than your opponent, you need to be ready to fall back if you don't regain the advantage relatively quickly. If you lose 2 or more players, you should fall back to the safest point and regroup. The fight will almost always be lost in this case. Regularly reminding yourself to check the kill feed is a habit you will have to develop. Not only will it give you team death information, but occasionally you might also catch an enemy character change you weren't expecting, or get positional information too. The enemy Reaper just killed my Ana. My Ana is behind me. Therefore, Reaper is behind me.
Quick maths!
Depending on your character and ability to 1v1 a Reaper, you'll now know whether to run or stand and fight, increasing your chances of getting a kill or staying alive. See point 1. Gathering intel is the easiest and fastest way to help turn a fight in your favor. It's why abilities like Sombra's invisibility and Hanzo's sonic arrow are so strong when used correctly. Stay with your team. If you can't see any of your teammates and you're not a flanker, something is wrong. Generally speaking, trying to go 1v1 without any help in sight is a great way to get ganged up on by their entire team. It is statistically very unlikely you're winning a 1v2 in Overwatch, so try to use your whole team to take fights against disjointed groups of enemy players. If you have to go for the 1v1 to take out a high priority target like a Widowmaker in order to push forward, make sure to secure the kill as quickly as possible and get out if you can't manage it, rather than beating your head against a proverbial wall. Oftentimes, forcing a character to play defensively can achieve the same effect that killing them would have. It takes them out of the fight for a certain amount of time. Use your intuition to determine whether it's worth the risk of getting killed and wasting time to secure that pick and push, or not. Knowing high-level positioning and being in the most ideal position on a map is great, if your team does it as well. However, if your entire team wants to spawn camp on first point Dorado defense, being on the high ground won't necessarily do you much good. Positioning relative to your teammates is more important than the personal map positioning. Try to utilize both and integrate the latter into the former as much as possible. When the fight is over, get out and do not stagger. If you cannot reset quickly, then by all means get some shots off and gain a bit of ultimate charge, but really, you need to die to the enemy or environment as quickly as possible. If you already have your ultimate, if possible, suicide by environment as soon as you can to prevent your opponents getting ultimate charge off you. This is known as resetting. Getting caught out and dying or getting demech'd long after a team fight is essentially lost can waste precious time for your team, and the impatient among them will engage without you. This starts a cycle of team fights that are begun without your team having a maximum amount of players, resulting in a completely unwinnable situation. This is known as trickling. These habits are hugely prevalent in lower ranks, and very hard habits to control on a team basis. Just do your part to mitigate them yourself, and hopefully this will help in the grand scale of things. A quick disclaimer before we go into ultimates. It's worth noting that the next few points on ultimates lean heavily on your guideline more than rule policy. Ultimate usage can be incredibly complex. These points should all definitely be taken as general guidelines more than actual rules. Understanding ultimates is not easy, and always situational, but there are a few things you can do to help gain the most out of your ult. Understand the proper time to use your ultimate. You need to try and use some ultimates to initiate a fight. Oftentimes, waiting until mid-fight to use these ultimates leaves plenty of room for the opposing team to use their ultimates first, or just to get a pick or two, which forces your team to reset. Other ultimates need to be used reactively, such as support ultimates when your team is low, or to swing the fight in your favor after losing a teammate. Combine ultimates wherever possible. This can allow for exceptions to the down 2 players rule. A good ultimate or ultimate combination can win any fight, as long as you have enough players for the proper follow-up. Never invest ultimates into a lost fight. Something else that tends to be seen more in lower ranks is a single player trying to take down an entire team with their ultimate. Know this, if half your team is dead, you should not use your ultimate. The fight is essentially already lost. It is a much better play to reset and use the same ultimate to initiate the retake with a full team behind you. Never invest ultimates into a one fight. Conversely, a good rule of thumb is to sometimes use an ult when you are up one player to secure the fight, use it rarely and only when necessary, when up 2 players, and never when up by 3. Take more dry fights. On attack, it is sometimes good to engage in a fight without intending to use any ultimates at all, in order to get your opponent to invest ultimates into their preservation and allowing your team to build up a better ult economy, and thus advantage. This is known as a dry fight. Do not hold your ultimates for too long. Everybody wants to get a sick play of the game, but holding onto your ultimate for too long is massively disadvantageous to your team and winning team fights in general. It is perfectly okay to whiff an ult sometimes, going for a high-risk, high-reward play. You can always get your ult back and try again. You don't need a 6k ultimate every time to get value. If you wait for the perfect opportunity to get a 6-man Graviton Surge or EMP, you'll only ult around twice a week. Remember, the team that gets the first pick usually wins the fight. Getting 1 or 2 kills can open up the fight and let your team roll in to finish the rest. There are 5 other players on your team. You don't need to do everything. You don't always even have to get kills with your ult to get value out of it, though it helps. Certain ultimates like Diva's Self-Destruct can be used to force enemies into positions where they can be killed more easily. Using Genji's Dragon Blade to bait out Zenyatta's Transcendence so that Zarya can use her Graviton Surge and end the fight is a good example of this. Do not over-invest ultimates. If you have 6 ultimates before the fight starts, be ready for your teammates to use theirs, and if they are effective, save yours. Any teamfight usually only needs 1, 2, or potentially 3 ultimates to win. Using more than that should only happen during an ult-pocalypse, when both teams have 5 or more ultimates to swing the fight momentum in your favor, or once you have judged that the ultimate is necessary and can turn a fight from loss to won. This of course comes back to the whole don't use an ultimate into a one fight point. If you are going to combine ultimates and you have several possible combinations, try to determine beforehand who is going to use theirs and when. If you don't have a microphone, utilize the in-game prompts and watch for someone on your team to set up a play. This way you don't have to invest Self-Destruct, Dragon Blade, Nano Boost, and Rocket Barrage into a single Graviton Surge. If you are playing a support role, do your best not to use 2 support ultimates at once. Communication is key here, as well as knowing which support ultimates are more useful in certain situations, and using that knowledge to plan around both your ult and your fellow supporter's ult. For example, Zenyatta's Transcendence is better to count Zarya's Graviton Surge than Lucio's Sound Barrier is. But, unlike Transcendence, Sound Barrier can counter Junkrat's Riptire if timed perfectly. Now that you have a better understanding of ultimate usage, let's talk about teamfights in general. Don't linger in the choke. Push. This one is massively prevalent at lower ranks. It's a combination of indecisiveness and plain old fear of failure. It's worth noting that committing to a bad plan is better than committing to no plan at all. If someone on your team pushes in, then everybody should follow them. If you can get the tanks in and get everybody else to keep up, you'll start winning more. Early chokes are the worst offenders here. Point A Hanamura, Volskaya, and King's Row are the most obvious examples of people dancing around in the choke. Remember that the enemy team is at a massive spawn disadvantage. Even if a few of you die in the attempt, likelihood is a picked enemy will still be heading back to the fight whilst you're standing in the choke again, ready to try a second, more advantageous push. All the better if your team loses a Lucio or Tracer and they lose an Ana or a Narissa. Keep mobility in mind during these occasions, it will only add to your advantage. This doesn't always mean directly engaging with the enemy either. Sometimes it just means getting better positioning to have the advantage and then engaging the enemy. Almost never start the fight at a disadvantage. Meaning that if just one player on your team gets picked randomly before the fight, usually the best course of action is to wait for them to respawn and rejoin the team before doing anything. If the fight starts and a player gets picked, you should continue the fight to see if you can get the kill advantage until your team is down 2 players, as previously discussed. The one major exception to this rule is overtime. Do the best you can to stay alive, get to the point, and get a kill. In that order. Healers are high priority targets here. Often one of those will make everybody else's subsequent attempts to get back and get a pick easier. It is okay to not be fighting or firing at certain times. Hiding and waiting for your team to get back is not just sometimes the right course of action, it's almost always the right way to recover after a lost team fight. This means showing yourself to the enemy as little as possible. Not shooting and not peeking. DPS, I'm looking at you. Keep yourself alive, but use as few cooldowns as you can until everybody is ready. Use this time to plan, strategize, and gain improved positioning. Minimize risk and increase your advantages as much as possible before the upcoming team fight. Winning means doing the right thing at the right time. The goal of flanking is to engage with the enemy at the same time as your team, but from another direction. Randomly poking at their backline to initiate can create an opening, but if your team isn't ready, there's little to no point. Poke damage is only useful right before a fight, when it can create an opening for a coordinated push. Otherwise, all you're doing is giving the opposing healers ultimate charge. You can poke to get ult charge yourself, but only when there is little chance of getting picked. Going for unnecessary poke and getting picked for it is massively feeding. Dive comp is only good if it's executed with a certain amount of coordination. Most heroes in dive are low damage, but good at getting to certain places quickly to collapse on the target at the same time. If people in your comms are screaming, "You need more damage," oftentimes they're just showing their ignorance. 9 times out of 10, you don't need a Junkrat or a Bastion, you need damage concentration. Understand hero weaknesses and swap when necessary. For example, don't play short-range, low-mobility heroes into long-range. Playing a Reaper or Junkrat into a Widowmaker or Pharah without backup is less than ideal. If you're playing an easy diveable hero like McCree or Zenyatta and you're not getting the support you feel you deserve, better to switch to something more survivable and stop complaining than risk tilting your team and yourself. More on that in the mentality section. You need to try to learn the difference between a flaw in team composition and a flaw in execution. Swapping too much at the wrong time can result in the loss of vital ult charge that can be essential to winning a team fight. Learn where and when to take the fight. You can only take the point or move the payload when all the enemies are dead. If the payload or point isn't the ideal place to take a fight, then take it somewhere else. Only make the call to go to the point if it is advantageous. Win the fight elsewhere if you have to, and then take the point. If it's overtime, yelling "touch point" when your entire team is dead can be a little irritating. Everybody is aware that that's the goal, and sometimes it's just plain old impossible to do. Minimize moments of irritation, and you minimize tilting. Sometimes you just have to let it go.
You have to let it go.
3 on a payload is not always the right call. Oftentimes, having one person on the payload and having everybody else move forward and take advantage of late spawns, gain better positioning, and pressing the advantage allows the payload to get farther by preventing a fight on point, and therefore preventing a stall. This is called taking map control. Communication is your most powerful ability, and it has no cooldown. Be clear and concise in your comms. The kind of information your team needs to know is who is low on the other team, who needs healing on your team, who to focus, when to retreat, what ultimates to use in the upcoming fight, and what ultimates the opponents have. You can shot call, but keep it simple. If you feel like your team can handle a complicated strategy, go for it, but always be absolutely ready for it to fall apart. Then respond to the actual situation, not the rigid pre-made plan. This is macro management over micromanagement. Although communication can be extremely valuable, it can also be useless and sometimes detrimental. If someone on comms is just saying, "What the heck? Let's go," or just making random exclamations, consider muting them for your own peace of mind. Learn the art of the peel. Peeling means taking the attention of your opponents away from a member of your team or healing them to keep them alive. It can be a Mercy pocketing a Zenyatta, or a Diva defense matrixing a McCree using his ultimate. Be aware of the most dangerous player on your opponent's team and watch your more fragile teammates. Any character that has low mobility and survivability should be kept in mind. If you're playing a character with damage cancelling or healing capabilities, keep an eye on your backline. Dying and not getting heals is usually a you problem. If you're not getting healed, consider staying with your healers more. If you're overextended and out of line of sight, that is your fault. If your healers don't want to follow you because you're spawn camping alone, that is also your fault. If your healers are constantly getting dived and taken out, that is not exactly your fault, but you can take active steps to prevent this from happening. Sometimes you genuinely do die because your healers aren't healing. Looking at you, DPS Moira. But you can't control that, so try to play around it. Most of the time though, healers want nothing more than to heal, but are prevented by something out of their control, and possibly in yours. All of this information is well and good if you're concentrating, focused, and in a positive mind frame, which in a game like Overwatch isn't always the case. So in order for us to pull off the gameplay side of things efficiently, we need to take a look at your mentality. What is tilting? Being tilted means that your emotions are impacting your gameplay in a negative manner. It's originally a poker term for when a hot-headed player would make a rash or poor judgment call after losing a big hand and becoming incensed by it. In Overwatch, it doesn't necessarily mean you are angry, although oftentimes it does. Being overexcited or even listening to hype or emotional music can cause a player to become tilted. Do not let your teammates tilt you. The mute button is extremely useful, so use it. If there is no useful information being shared, you don't need to hear it. Focus on your gameplay, not on someone whining about not getting healed.
I need healing.
The team composition itself is less important than not getting tilted by the team composition. At all tiers lower than Masters, or maybe higher, good team compositions are less important than having everyone playing what they know and having some level of coordination. A team with 5 players on damage playing the roles that they are comfortable with will do better than a perfect 2-2-2 comp at the same level with tanks and healers who have never played the role before in their lives. Do not tilt your teammates. People do not play well when they are feeling defensive, angry, defeated, nervous, or almost any other negative emotion. Having angry teammates is the fastest way to lose, and it makes the game not fun anymore. Try not to be negative in any way. Apologize for your own mistakes when you notice them, but don't focus on them. Don't even make negative noises when you lose a point. You'd be surprised at how much one player's personal negativity affects a whole game. Even just pointing out what went wrong in a negative way can set people off or tilt them. Overwatch is an emotional game. If your comp is bad, politely ask people to switch. This means no whining, no demands, no threats to throw. If they don't switch, work around it. Getting people angry will usually either make them stay on the hero to prove your criticism wrong, or switch to a troll pick.
We can do it together!
Any criticism other than positive criticism can and will be taken the wrong way, and the subject of your comment will get tilted. You can rage about how people should grow the fuck up all you want, but the simple fact of the matter is that the average player's ego is more fragile than a soap bubble. All games are temporary. If you notice that any one player on your team is particularly bad, grit your teeth and bear it until the match is over, then promptly avoid them as teammate and pray you're matched against them in the near future. Do not micromanage. Telling someone how to play their role mid-game only distracts you and frustrates them. Learn to be okay with losing. As much of a cliche as it is to say, Overwatch is a team game. There are 11 other players and a map affecting the outcomes of the game. There will be times in which no matter how hard you try, you will still lose. Just do your best in every game, even when the team is terrible. The only person whose performance matters should be your own. A wise player known as Seagull once said that a third of your games will be losses no matter what you do, and in a third you will be carried to the win. The final third will be close enough that you will have a direct influence on the outcome of the game. That's where your gameplay and effort matter.
Experience tranquility.
Stop worrying about your SR. If you're playing well and still losing SR, either you're having an unlucky streak that will turn around soon, or you're not as good as you think you are. Focus on your personal improvement and SR will follow. It's just an arbitrary number to get people to play the game more. Although it's a good general indicator, SR is not a very accurate representation of skill. If you worry about losing too much SR, you're on a quick path to Tilt City. Acting tilted is a great way to become tilted. You'd be surprised how often mentality follows behavior, rather than the other way around. Don't be nervous about competitive Overwatch. Not least because it will instantly tilt you, but try to look at competitive as just quick play with slightly less chaos and numbers attached. The only real way to get over it is to play it more often. The more you play, the less scary it becomes. Be considerate of your opponents. We're all here because we love the game. The enemy in this match is your teammate in the next. Try to be considerate of things like typing GG for good game at the end of a PC competitive match. If you find you're typing it only when you win, reconsider typing it at all. Typing this from the winning side, particularly after steamrolling your opponents, is borderline bad manners. If the losing side types it first, it's fine to reciprocate. Also, consider voting sportsmanship endorsements to the players who gave you the most trouble, or your opposing equal. There's nothing quite like having a fun back and forth Widowmaker duel and receiving a sportsmanship endorsement from them at the end of the game. Not everyone will understand this guide. It would not be surprising if many players had a hard time understanding or performing the acts from within this guide on a consistent basis. Following all of them takes practice and dedication. As a general rule, becoming toxic because people don't understand the fundamentals of a game like Overwatch is useless and helps no one. Learn how to play around the people that don't perform the actions in this guide. Go into every match assuming you won't get this type of help, and you can only be pleasantly surprised if you do. Decide on the reason that you play the game. Do whatever you can to have fun, if that's your goal, but do not affect the gameplay experience for others in a negative manner. It's fair to say that sometimes self-improvement at a game can come at the cost of pure enjoyment to a degree. If you get satisfaction from playing at a high level, improving, and being competitive, then proceed, and be ready to put in the work necessary to achieve your goal, whatever that might be. Just make sure this doesn't give you a negative mentality. Be mindful of the reasons that others play the game for your own sake and theirs. So then, that's it. We really hope you've learned some cool things during this guide, and would like to give a special thank you to Voyager for sharing it and allowing us to create this video. We'd love to hear more about your success stories in the comments below, so please don't be shy. Thanks a lot for watching, and as always, welcome to the second level.
It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.